Hello everyone and welcome to another Feed Army video. My name is Emmanuel and today I will teach you how to submit your Shopify feed to multiple target countries for Google Merchant Center. So basically, if you're, for example, targeting the UK and you want to start targeting the rest of EU, how do you do that and what are the best options? Because there are several options that you can move forward with. With option 1 is the default one, and that is not the recommended one, which is basically using your default Google Merchant Center feed and adding additional countries in Google Merchant Center. So let's have a look on how to do that. When you're in Google Merchant Center, you go to Settings and then Data Sources. Then what you do is go and click on your feed. And then click on the edit icon for the countries, and here you can add multiple countries. Now what will happen is that if you're targeting the UK and then adding additional countries, the default currency that you're submitting is actually in GBP, so Great British Pounds. And that means that when you are viewing your ads, let's say in France, you will see two currencies, one which is Euro and then GBP. This is a disadvantage because consumers will be able to see that you're not a local merchant. To resolve that, it is best to submit the feed in the local language and in the local currency. So instead of English and GBP, you would submit it in French and then using Euro. Then you will get a lot more traffic as well, because historically Google has limited the traffic that you can get when you're not targeting the local currency. So if you're using, for example, GBP in France, most likely you will get anything up to 10% of traffic. And that is obviously not great. You want to maximize your advertising abilities, which you can do then by submitting it in euros. Now, I do mention that you have to localize your language as well. Of course, you don't have to do that. So if you find that English, for example, in France is getting you a lot of potential sales, then obviously submit a feed in French using Euro and also in English using Euro. And you can actually submit any language that you wish as long as there is interest in the market. For example, in America, you can actually submit like in Chinese, Spanish, French maybe as well. And so as long as there is traffic and interest in that country and you know that, then you can submit those feeds. So that is option 1. That is the easiest way to set up a feed in foreign countries and using the default currency, but it is not the recommended one. The second one is basically setting up either multiple stores or subdomains. What are the benefits for that? And there is also a negative actually. So if, for example, your domain is example.com and you want to localize in France, you would want to, for example, buy example.fr. That is great for perceiving that your website is a local business. However, nowadays with so many domains in all over the world, I recommend that you actually just use example.com because in most devices, for example, because users are most likely using a smartphone, although they might want to make a purchase via a desktop, they don't see the URL in a smartphone. It's only when you want to tap onto the example.com URL, then you can expand and see the whole URL and not really the specific details of the domain name. So using a subdomain or a different top level domain is not going to change much for the perspective of the consumer, as long as you are very clear on the website where you're located and etc. And even then, most likely, if you're in the UK and you have example.fr, you will still want to use your English address to ensure transparency. So if you're using then a subdomain or a top-level domain, you can use the Google and YouTube app for Shopify using different stores if you're using a different domain. So if you have like a different store, but if you have one store and you're adding your domains or subdomains to that store, you will not be able to use those and connect them to different accounts. because there are limitations to one Google and YouTube app to one Google Merchant Center account. So what you can do is then have a different store, so a different Shopify account, and then you can submit those two countries to those two Google Merchant Center accounts, and that will work then. If you're using a subdomain, you can also then have different accounts, Shopify accounts, if you want, but you don't need to register a new Google Merchant Center account, because if you register https://example.com, then you can add any domain from that store to the Google Merchant Center account. However, if you're registering https://www.example.com, then you cannot register a subdomain to that Google Merchant Center account. To fix that, just change and remove the www from your store verification, so the store name. And you can go to settings, business info, and here you change your URL. And so the downside of this method is, of course, that you need to have another store, and that is not really recommended. You're also having other disadvantages, like splitting up your traffic. As you can imagine, ranking one website is much easier with a lot more traffic than if you're having to rank multiple stores on Google search. So that's why having just one domain for all the countries is much more suitable. And you can use the Google and YouTube app to submit now to multiple markets. All you have to do is go to settings, markets, and then you're here, and then you can add the create market, and you can add markets here. This method is okay. You can use the Google the Google and YouTube app for that. However, I recommend using the MultiFeeds app because it has a lot more features. Yes, you have to pay for it, but the difference between the Google and YouTube app and the MultiFeeds app is quite big. For example, you can set up feed rules per country. You can easily set up rules to exclude products per country. It allows you to also set up markets where, for example, if you're submitting specific products in the UK, but you don't want to submit those specific products to France, you can then exclude them from the markets within the app itself. So it can all be automated. And of course, you have lots of feed rules. For example, set up custom meta tags that you can import, expand your product data feed quality. Because improving your data feed quality is actually the foundation of your advertising efforts. The higher your quality of your data feed, the better. For me personally, I use two different methods of working. The first method is using feed rules to bulk improve repetitive values, and then I improve every single product manually. Yes, it takes a lot of time. However, the improvements over time that you get from more traffic, more sales, outweighs basically your efforts in improving the data feed. So I improve everything, and I even have a script actually that tracks all the improvements that you can check in another video that I've created, that checks the improvement like impressions and clicks before and after the change in, let's say, the title, product type, etc. So that allows you to keep track of everything. So that is option 2, where you can, so we spoke for option 1, which is just basically do nothing, change the country options in Google Merchant Center. And the second option is adding a store subdomain or a new store, so a new top level domain for each country. However, the recommended option, that is my favorite one, is just use your base website URL and then use MultiFeeds to submit each country to Google Merchant Center, and then you can use your own language app to import the translations and then so localize for each country. Of course, you can submit English to every country if there is a market for it, but also localize. So then you can set up 2 different campaigns. So then you, for example, you can set up 2 campaigns in Google Ads, one for France in French and one in France for English. And then you can submit different budgets, different strategies and bidding strategies, etc. So as you can see, there are multiple ways to submit a feed to Google Merchant Center. Now, there are there's one thing: if you're using the second option to submit different top-level domains, you need to have different accounts. The recommended way is to set up an advanced campaign. This allows you to submit sub-accounts, so one, for example, for your .com website and one for your .fr website. Do not submit different accounts for each country that you're targeting, because that puts you at a higher risk of getting suspended. If you're using a sub account, then these sub accounts are kind of linked and you get a higher trust signal that allows Google to say, they already have a .com website, they have a high trust level. Then using the sub account for .fr is absolutely fine, and then the success rate is much higher in getting approved. While if you have then a separate account, like on a different email address, that email address might have no signals, no trust signals, and the website might have no reviews, then that will be an issue. Now, the second part of this video is talking about reviews, not really the setup of the product feeds, but the reviews itself. I've seen many merchants setting up the reviews for all domains, like importing them. And because they think, okay, this is part of the .com website, this is my business, I can import reviews on .fr. Well, actually you can't, because the reviews are locked to the domain name and to that specific product in that specific language. If you're importing them to another domain, even if it's your own, Google will see that as a fake review. So do not submit reviews from a different domain to the .fr website in this example. So make sure that you localize all your reviews and submit the product reviews to Google Merchant Center. Yes, that means that your new website will have no reviews in this case, but do the effort then to send out an email after a purchase is done that you can collect a review. And then we want to talk about Google Merchant Center settings. Now, the important thing for when you're submitting a shipping details is that you localize your shipping details for both the delivery time and also the pricing and the currency. So make sure that you submit the same currency as your data feed. Of course, if you choose option 1, for example, you're submitting everything in GBP, then you can have all your shipping settings in GBP. However, if you're localizing and submitting it in euro, then your shipping pricing must be in euro as well. And make sure that your website is also in euro. So either have a unique shipping page for each country, or merge everything onto one shipping page where you explain what the shipping rates are locally. So for France, let's say euro, for UK, GBP, let's say for Thailand, THB, the US, USD, and so on and so on. Make sure that you then add the cutoff time, the transit time, and also the handling time separately on your policy and within Google Merchant Center settings. So located here. And then we also want to talk about the return policy. Make sure that you submit a returns policy for each country. If the same policy applies to all, then you can do something like here, where it applies to multiple countries. If you have different policies for each country, then just simply add a return policy for each country separately. So these are the important parts basically for submitting to a different target country. So how to submit it based on the data feed, your reviews, your shipping policies, and your return policies. Now, one final thing, it might be obvious to most, but I still see that as an issue in, let's say, 1 out of 5 businesses. When they submitting, let's say, to France and they have everything in French, they kind of have like English and French mixed into the website. Let's say the menu is in English, but all the content is in French. Make sure that everything is absolutely in French. This includes the menu, the content of the website, maybe also the videos, but that's not really a policy requirement, but that's more of a consumer benefit. So increasing your conversion rate is quite important. Make sure that your website is localized, pretty much everything. And then what the most common mistake is that they forget to update the policy. So make sure that is in French as well. So we've got 5 different things that you have to prepare, and make sure that you prepare everything. So translate your website first, then add your returns policy and your shipping policies in Google Merchant Center, and then submit the feed. Don't do it the other way around. So it's important that you do things in a step-by-step way so that you can have a lower chance of getting rejected. And those are the basics of submitting a data feed to a different target country. And then for Google Ads, of course, you can then just submit a new campaign. Either you can use all feeds and then you just specify the target country there, and then it will automatically choose the correct feed. Or you can use feed labels so that you can specify which feed to use. I like to always enforce feed labels, because then I am 100% sure that only, for example, in France, only the French products are being submitted and nothing else. So like, for example, you're submitting to Singapore with the local language, then I don't want that to accidentally be mixed up in France. So these are the basics, and of course there are a lot more situations where you cannot predict issues. Make sure that you do things step by step and submit the target countries, because of course I'm making a video to explain everything, but it is not everything. It's kind of impossible to predict issues. For example, when I set up feeds, I do things in a methodical way so that if I see an issue, I can rectify it straight away without any issues. It's very rare that there are issues, but it can sometimes happen. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment downstairs, or if you have any tips or recommendations, feel free to leave them downstairs. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.